Professor Wergely's here. Today we're going to be on lecture 25. We're going to be talking about Firebase Authentication. These are some of the most useful lectures for your final project. I actually recommend you use Firebase. You may have thought of your final project idea already, and the first thought that probably came to mind was using Node and MongoDB. Now, there's no problem with that. You can use Node and MongoDB, except if you use Firebase, that part of the system is already taken care of for you. You'll still need backend developers. So you'll still need some developers to look at how to connect to Firebase and looking through the documentations and looking at the API. However, a lot of the structure, a lot of the scalability, that's all been implemented for you. So you'll see a link here. This is probably the most useful tutorial you can go over. Okay, it's called AngularFire. It's the AngularFire GitHub, and they have docs. Okay, they have documentation. So what also is useful here, so I'm on lecture 25. Make sure you click on this GitHub link. We're going to go to it here in a second and clone the code. But you'll see the second link is an installation and setup. These are the most useful tutorials you can go through. And what I recommend to do is just literally go through it and use the same credentials that they or use the same database structure that they set up. So for example, you'll see they're using a database called items. I recommend you use items and follow this tutorial and run your app locally. And today we're actually going to set up using a login. We're going to log in with Firebase credentials since we were talking about OAuth last time. And then we're going to use Firebase's database. They call it Firestore. So first things first, what is Firebase? Okay, so while you're cloning that repo, I'll talk a little bit about what Firebase is, and just so you can get an overview. You'll see here, Firebase gives you the tools to develop high-quality apps, grow your user base, and earn money. This is one of the cool things, is that they actually have a system so you can do in-app advertising, and Google will keep track of it, and they will basically give you a royalty or give you a cut of the money that your app produces in advertising revenue. So you'll see they cover all different types of platforms. Not only do we use this in web, I've used it for iOS projects, I've used it for Android. I didn't know you could use it for Unity. That's pretty cool. So if you're thinking about doing a game and you needed to store some of the user data, take a look at that. You can use this for Unity as well. C++, so .NET. You can use this for .NET, Windows servers. And we're mainly going to be focusing on the web. So if you do get started with the web, it talks about JavaScript. We're using Angular, so it's actually TypeScript. What you can do here, though, is you can still get an idea of what Firebase has to offer. The imports are similar, except they happen in the module. The Firebase configuration is all the same. So a lot of this is the same. The only difference is written in JavaScript. So that's why what I recommend to do when you're working on your final project is to search for Firebase. These docs will pop up, and then come back over here to the AngularFire GitHub and look at these docs to try to compare between the two. What I like about these AngularFire docs is they have docs, but they also have code. So if you go into the source code, and I want to implement Firebase Authentication, which is what we're going to do today, they already have a little demo app. So you'll see they have the module, they have the TypeScript. So if I look at the TypeScript file, you'll see they actually wrote code. Okay, they have a pipe. This is really advanced Angular. We didn't go this far. Technically, I would say there should be another class, maybe Web 3, where we go really deep into Angular and maybe also go into React. We didn't really talk about pipes too much, but we are going to go over them today. Probably not as advanced as this GitHub is, but we will take a look at asynchronous calls today, because that's the key thing for Firebase. If I just go to Firebase, let's say I look at the wiki. Okay, it's a platform developed by Google for creating mobile and web applications. It was originally independent, but Google bought them out. The main thing is it's a real-time database. So we looked at socket.io, and we could see how we can update everybody's page at the same time. Conceptually, that's similar to Firebase. It's a real-time database. So every time the database updates, it'll update the page without refreshing. That is something that's very powerful. And that's why a lot of people like Firebase. Now, if you look at Facebook, they don't really do this. When a new post comes in, you'll see a little notification at the top that says, hey, there's been a new post. But then you need to click it for the page to reload. Because you could imagine, let's say I'm sitting on my homepage on Facebook and I get 1,000 new posts. And I'm looking at the post of my friend getting married, and all of a sudden 1,000 new posts come in and knock that post down below, and I can't see it. And then I'm looking at a new post, and all of a sudden it gets knocked down below because new posts are coming in. So there's some applications where a real-time database will be very useful for stocks, for game scores, for playing games, for chat systems, for video conferencing where you want everything in real time. Some things like Facebook, you may not want it in real time. Maybe if a user updates the post, it'll show in real time. But if a new post comes in, maybe you want the user to select a button or click something, and then you can see all the new posts. So depending on what your application is, the real-time part of the database may be beneficial in some aspects, may not be beneficial in others. So to get set up, we're pretty much running through this right here. So we need Angular CLI. You should already have that. And then we need to add AngularFire. We're not there yet. First, let's go over here to Firebase and let's set up a project. So hopefully you have an account set up. If not, that's okay. But you can see if I go to the console, okay, if I go to the console, you probably do not have any projects yet. That's okay. You will click on a new project. So I'm going to select new project. You should do this if you want this lecture to work. I may need to delete some of these test projects. Let me try to create one. Let's see what happens. So you can call this, this is called our distribution app. I'm going to make a distribution app. So what this, it's actually called grade distribution. Okay, grade distribution. And let me back up before we click OK. And let me just tell you the overall idea for this app. So what this app is going to do is it's going to have a login. When you get to the home page, the user can select which courses they want to see. And this grade distribution app is going to go to the Mizzou. And I probably can't find that page, but let me see if I can find Mizzou grade distribution for courses. It's an old website that doesn't have an API. Let me see if this is the right one. No, it's not. Where is that? Mizzou Records. It's a really old website. You can look at the grade distribution for courses. It's the history of all the grade distributions. Well, let me see. What's that URL? Let me find it real quick. I want to show you this. So this project that we're building has a scraper component. And we're going to use Firebase Auth. We're going to use Cloud Functions. So it's called MU Grade Distribution. Okay, so let me try that. Mizzou Grade GPA Distribution. Let's see if it pops up. Hopefully that site's still there. Let's see. Maybe this one right here. Okay, here it is. Here's the site. I'm glad it's still up. Essentially, this is the data that I'm pulling. Remember, can you guys see my screen? Can you guys see this grade distribution? Okay. Remember, your application has to have data. If the TA opens up your app and there's nothing there, they need to spend 30 minutes putting in data. You're going to get points deducted. So write a scraper, start pulling data, connect to an API. APIs are not required. They could be awarded bonus depending on what you implement. But here's a site. I can pick the term. So let's say I do, let's say we're in fall 2020. So I'm going to do spring 2020. And I can see all the instructors. Look how horrible this website is. I hate to say that. But look how horrible this website is. I'm trying to find me, Wergelese. Can I find me? Takes forever. Where's Wergelese? Wergelese, can't find it. Where is it? Anybody see it? Wergelese. I still cannot find it. Okay, here's Wergelese. Let's click on this so I can click on the instructor. If I do a search just on Wergelese, we can see everything. So I can also pick courses. So after I pick Wergelese, you'll see it doesn't even filter the courses based off that instructor. It just shows all the courses. So this is a horrible UI design. Let's see, we're looking for Web Application Development 2. Let's see if it's down here somewhere. Let's see, web. Okay, here's Web Dev 1. And I don't even know if this is Web Dev 2, but I'll try it. And let's see what that brings up. Okay, brings up something 2830. But you can see how horrible this is. This is a really poor user experience. Look at these drop downs. They go forever. And for me, I can't even find it. Here's comp sci. Okay, let's try that. Course number. They just display all the course numbers. Let me just try this. Comp sci, so it filters it even more. So here's Web Dev 1. You'll see the GPA for my course is 3.4. I was actually surprised. I'm actually surprised to see this. That's a pretty high GPA for my courses, at least. And you'll see the information. Let's see. Isn't this a fall-only class you're querying in spring? That is true. Let's go for last fall. I probably shouldn't do this because this could take forever, but let's try it. Fall 2830. Let me get rid of this. Let me get rid of this. Thank you, Jack. It is a fall only. Scrolling. Okay, let's try this. Comp sci, fall, here's 40. So I probably shouldn't have brought this one up. You can see the GPA here. Try not to let that scare you. You guys will do fine, do good on the final project. But here's the data that I'm working with. So here's the page that I'm going to scrape. We're not going to scrape it today, but the overall app idea is this website's not very good. I'm going to make a login. It goes to the home page. They can pick their course. When they pick their course, I'm actually going to come over here and scrape the page. So if I right-click, do an inspect, you'll see the structure is the same. So it's basically a table. I can go and I can scrape this data. I can scrape the course department, the course title, the course number, and all this various information. I'm going to put that into Firebase, and then I'm going to display the page in real time. Now, every user will have different courses that they're following. So I'm going to keep track of the users. Every user's homepage will look different. And if they've searched the course before, I'm going to store it in the database so I don't have to search it again. If they want a new course, it'll run the scraper, go and grab the new course, and put it in the database. And if two people search the same course, well, I only need to scrape that once. So you need to figure out some way to do that efficiently. If you scraped it twice for both of those users, it'd be okay for the course. But in the industry, that would definitely be not efficient, and you would be storing duplicate data everywhere. So that's the overall concept of the app. And in addition, you'll see some numbers here. It'd be nice if they had some graphs. They could click on a course. They could view some graphs. Using graphs is not required, but that could be bonus. Let's say you use Angular and you use NGX charts, which is built off of, I can't even think of the name now, but we were talking about it yesterday. I can't remember who I was talking about that with, but NGX charts is good. You can look at NG2 charts. I think it's built on top of D3, if anybody's heard of D3. And so, yeah, I'm going to display charts and various information on this site. So that's the idea for my final project. Now, don't copy this idea. I'm using this idea to show you guys what a good project is. And let's go ahead and start developing. So that's the whole idea of the grade distribution app. Hopefully that can give you an idea of what a final project should look like. Have a login, have a home screen. for each user, the home screen's different. I have a scraper involved because we learned scrapers. I'm using Firebase, so I have a database. The data is persistent. It's going to be hosted on HTTPS, so it's secure, and various information. So here's grade distribution app. I've already created this, so I'm going to put fall 20. I'm going to put fall 20. You can just do grade distribution app, whatever you want to call it, fall 20. So let's go through this. Step 2, do you want Google Analytics for your Firebase project? What's nice about this is it has testing. It also has, when your app crashes, it will log it and report the logs. You'll see you also get access to cloud messaging, which could be like push notifications. Okay, you'll see it is recommended. I'm going to go ahead and click yes for it. You can decide what you want to do on your final project. And then it asks for an account. I have a default account for Firebase, so that's what I would use. I don't know if you guys see that there. Maybe you can let me know. Do you see a default account? If not, you can create a new one. Okay, if you see default account, go ahead and select it, and then I'm going to create the project. Now, Firebase has so many tools. I love this system because, the problem solver app, it's not a good app. I admit it's just a text-based system, but I got that app up in 2 days. Now, those 2 days were 12-hour days, but I got a complete app working on desktop, iOS, and Android using Firebase in 2 days. I don't know if you guys have used the app. Somebody hacked it recently, but that's okay. The point is, it was up in 2 days. So if you use Firebase, you're going to save days of time. It's a steep learning curve, though. I'm not going to lie. It's hard to learn how the API works. But if you spend about maybe 1 day learning how it works, you'll save 3 or 4 days worth of time. So you don't have to build Node.js and MongoDB. So you'll see what they have. They have authentication. One thing is, do not use the real-time database. That's the old one. What you'll want to use is called Cloud Firestore. You'll see a lot of documentation on the real-time database. I don't see them supporting that much longer. So I recommend you do not use the real-time database. Use Firestore. This tutorial I give you here is for Firestore. So make sure to use Firestore. You'll see they have storage, which is like a file system. They have hosting, so you can actually host your site up here if you prefer, or you can put it on your EC2. It doesn't matter. They have cloud functions, which is like backend code. If you want to scrape or pull data, you can put it in a cloud function. They even have machine learning packages. You can put machine learning up here for your application. They have a logging system for when your app crashes. They help you distribute the app. They do push notifications for mobile development. They have almost anything you need, they have up here. And it's all built for you. It's all built for you. All you do is connect to the API. So we're going to be using authentication. So you're going to come over here to the authentication tab, and you're going to need to enable it. Okay, you're going to need to enable authentication. So if I come over here to my project, if I come over here to the settings, okay, you'll see there's no apps for your project. Select the platform to get started. So I'm going to select web because that's what you're doing. You can do iOS, Android, web, or Unity. I'm interested to see if anybody does a Unity project this semester and uses Firebase with it. I'd be very interested to see how that works out. I'm going to click on web. You'll see the little web symbol there. And we need to give our app a name. So we're going to do the same, grade distribution. Grade distribution, fall 20. So we're going to set up our Firebase first. Do you want to set up Firebase hosting? I'm going to show you how to host. So I'm going to say yes. You'll see no deployments yet. I'm going to register the app. Their Firebase hosting comes with HTTPS already set up. This is for JavaScript, so it's saying copy these at the bottom of your body. We're not going to use that because we're using TypeScript, so we'll click on Next. It says to install Firebase tools. We will need to do this. So if I come over here, this is going to be on our local machine. I'm on my local, and I have VS Code open. Okay, so I'm going to open up a terminal, and I'm going to install the Firebase tools like they've asked me to do. So I'm doing npm install globally. Firebase tools, this is on your local machine. Okay, what you'll do with Firebase is you build it on your local, you can test it on your local, and then when you're ready, you can push it up to Firebase hosting. If you want to put it up on your server, that's fine too. You'll just do an Ionic build or an Angular build. Today we're going to be using Angular. Go ahead and run the sudo command with it. Okay, since we're installing it globally. Okay, do a sudo command with it since we're installing it globally. And while this is installing, let me show you what Firebase is going to do. So if I do a little bit of a draw here. Okay, so let's imagine we have our app. Okay, we have our app, and here's the front end. Okay, here's the front end, and you know this is the front end. So what is it? It's going to be, you know, Angular, Ionic, those types of things. Angular, Ionic, React, whatever you're going to be using. If you were to build your system, you need this front end to connect to a back end, right? That's what we did in the REST lectures. So this is going to be what? Node. This is probably going to be Node. This is going to be PHP. This is going to be your back end. I'm typing with my finger, so it looks horrible. I know. This is your back end. Okay, so you have to build this. You have to build the back end that connects to the front end. So let's say I want to log in. You'd have to come over here. Node will take the credentials from the front end. It's going to go, then what? You're not going to have just a Node script. You're going to have the database as well. So here's your DB. Here's your DB. Here's MongoDB. You want to have Mongo, or you may have MySQL, or you may have MariaDB, whatever you're using. So here's MySQL, MongoDB. And you need to have your Node script, then go to the database, check the username and password. If it's correct, database returns it back. Node script checks it. If it's correct, then you need to let the front end know, and the front end will then go to the home page. Now, just to do a login in itself, that's going to take you a day or two to implement. You got to have a Node script, collects this stuff, goes to the database, does a query, finds the user, checks the password. Passwords have to be encrypted. You know, you have to do all that stuff we did in 2830. I don't know if you remember that. We did a login. We encrypted the passwords. You check the encrypted strings. If they're right, you pass it back, set a cookie on the front end. That lecture took us 2 lectures. I would say that would take you 3 to 4 days to implement. But we're in 4830, so you could probably do it quicker, maybe 1 or 2 days. You can get that done. Firebase has all of this for you. Firebase has all of this for you. So this right here, the DB in the back end, this is Firebase. This is Firebase. Firebase has pre-built APIs. So if I want to log in, they have Firebase Authentication. So I call the login method. I'll call the login method. It'll go, it'll check, it'll do the encryption, it'll come back and it'll tell me true or false. If I want to pull data, let's say I want to add data, I'll call the add method. Firebase handles all the backend, goes and collects the data, and then puts it over there into what is like MongoDB. It's a document-based system, so it's like MongoDB, although it's called Firebase. It's called Firestore. If I want to get the data, okay, so they have what's called value changes, or I'm just going to do get. The method is not called get, but I would call get. It will go, it will search for what database, what collection I need. It'll pull back the documents and send them back to the front end. So all this code here, the node scripts and the database, will be written for you. So you can literally call an API, and what do you have to focus on? The front-end developers will focus on the front end, meaning the login form, the home page, how it's displayed. The back-end developers will now focus on how to use this API. This is what the back-end developers will do at this time. They'll focus on using this API. So the back-end developers need to go to the AngularFire documentation and look at how to log in. They need to go and look at how to add data, how to get data. And this is what Firebase is going to take care of for you. Now, if you had to create the login, do all the session storing, that's going to take forever. If you had to go and pull data, you need to have an AJAX request come up here. The server then connects to the database, does the query, brings the results back, and then the server needs to return that to the front end. And then the front end needs to display all those results. So just even to get data or add data, that's going to take another 1 or 2 days to implement if you want to do it correctly. Let's see. Let's go back to the Firebase website. Okay, on the website, all I did was create a project. So I went to the dashboard. There's a little box to create a new project. I gave the project a name. And now we're installing the Firebase tools. Is that done? It is done. Any errors? I see some errors. I may have errors on mine because I already have Firebase tools already. So that may be a problem. Let me know if you see any errors on yours. Then it says to click next. Now you need to do a Firebase login. You got to do this on your local machine. So let's go ahead and do this. Firebase login. Okay, it's going to say I'm already logged in, but I can change that so I can do a Firebase log out. So you'll see Firebase has its own CLI. So I did a log out. I'm going to do log in, show you what it looks like. Do you want to allow Firebase to collect usage and error reporting? You need to check the privacy policy out. I'm going to say no for now. Look what happens. It comes over here. You go ahead and log in with your credentials. Do you want to allow the CLI to access your Google account? Yes. Boom, you're logged in. Come back to the terminal. Boom, you're logged in. Look how easy that was. Very easy. So now I'm logged into Firebase. That's good. And now it says you can do a Firebase init. We're not there yet, so don't run this yet. And then we're going to continue to the console. Okay, we're going to continue to the console. So now I have my app open. I have it available. So if I go back to the Firebase console, if you missed it, here's the Add Project button. Nick, click the Add Project. We called it Grade Distribution App Fall 20. Although you can just do Grade Distribution App. Once you create it, you'll see the dashboard. We went into the settings. You'll see this little gear icon up here at the top. Click on your settings, project settings, and then down here, we added a web app. If you had an iOS app, you'd add the iOS app. If you had an Android app, you'd also add the Android app. But for Ionic, it's all web-based. Okay, so you can do the web version. If you do create an iOS app and put it up on the App Store, at that time, you may create the iOS version here. But if it's Ionic, you're doing Ionic Serve, you create a little demo app, it may be encapsulated all in the web code. You just have to test it out. But you'll see now I have what's called the configuration. Now this is going to be your API key. It's going to have all your information. We need this information. If, in fact, when I created the project, it told us to put this information in there. So we're going to copy that in a second. If I go to authentication, okay, if I go to authentication, you can do get started. And now I'm enabling authentication as well. So after you have your project set up, now I can enable authentication. And look at all these different authentications I can do. You can log in with email and password, with a phone, your Google account, Facebook account, Twitter, GitHub, Yahoo, Microsoft, Apple, Anonymous. They have all these APIs set up. So if you want to log in with your Facebook account like other websites do, you can do that. And Firebase has already set up the code for you. All you do is pass in the user's credentials to Firebase's Facebook authentication method. How awesome is that? Okay, very awesome. We haven't ran the Firebase init yet. We're going to do that here in a second. On the authentication, make sure you enable password. That's what we're going to set up today. So I'm going to enable password. It says, do you want to allow users to sign up? So they have verification, password recovery. And you can have a passwordless sign-in, which is just an anonymous sign-in. Do you want to enable it? I'm going to say no. I want email and password. So I'll just enable the first one. Click on Save. You'll see it says enabled here. Okay, you'll see it says enabled here. And for this to work, we need to create a demo user, a test user. So if I come over to the users, there's none yet. I'm going to add one. And I'm going to call it test@test.com. And the password is going to be test. Okay, test. If I could do test, I would. Actually, in 2830, we did pass. So let's try that. Let's do pass. But it has to be 6 characters. So I'll do pass. Test@test.com. The password is pass. Okay, you remember in 2830, the username was test. The password was pass. We're following that theme here. So I'm going to click on add user. Now I can log in once we get this set up. Okay, once we get this set up, I can now use Firebase Authentication. So that's the thing about using Firebase. You got to go to the console. You got to learn how they do it. They only have the functionality that they've created. So if you want additional functionality, you have to build that yourself. Although they do have a lot of built-in functionality. Look at all these sign-in methods. It's crazy. And all I do is call the Facebook method. I don't need to write any of this code. I need to go to Facebook and get the API key, but that's about as difficult as it is. Get an API key, link it here with your Firebase. You'll see I need the API keys here. Link it with Firebase, then call the Firebase function. You can log in with Facebook accounts. Okay, we're about to go to the app now. So you got to set up the dashboard on Firebase, and then you can start using it in your application. So if I come back over here to the settings, we're going to need this configuration key here. We're going to need this in a second. We're not quite there yet, but we're going to use this here in about 2 or 3 steps. Okay, 2 or 3 steps. And if you ever get lost, I'm following this documentation here. We did install AngularFire. We're about to add this to our Angular project in a second. We need to add these keys in our environment TypeScript, and then we need to add some imports. We're running through this tutorial right here. The only thing it doesn't tell you is how to build it on the dashboard. That's something you need to look up on the on the Firebase docs. Okay, coming to the code. Let me know if you have questions. We're going here. Let me know if you got any questions. So I'm going to the GitHub, and now I'm going to clone the repo for the lecture today. So I'm over here in my VS Code. I've already logged into Firebase. You saw that earlier. Go ahead and go to your lecture directory. Okay, go to your lectures directory for 4830. What are we on? We're on lecture 25, so make a new directory. We're going to call this the grade distribution app. CD into lecture 25, and then I'm going to do a git clone. Now you don't need to create a lecture. When you do a git clone, it actually creates a directory. So you don't have to create a lecture if you don't want to. You can just do the git clone directly. Once I do the git clone, if you do an ls, you can cd into grade distribution vault 20. And you'll see no node modules here. So once you cd, make sure you do an npm install. So I'll do an npm install. So git clone, cd, npm install. That's what we've been doing all semester. Okay, so follow that procedure. Let it do its thing, and then we're going to do our Firebase init here in a second. We're in the master branch. I'm actually in the wrong branch. I need to switch over to the during class branch. The master branch here just has a default Angular app. There's nothing in it. In the during class branch, I actually have a little bit of code there for you. So you'll definitely want to switch over to the during class branch. We're going to do that here in a second. Let it do its npm install. Anybody have any questions up to this point? Okay, I've seen a lot of good final project ideas. A lot of good ideas this semester. A lot of useful applications with COVID. I've seen those. I've seen other useful applications for traveling. Some students are helping local businesses around Columbia. They're going to build some website or apps for some local businesses, some family businesses. A lot of good apps this semester. Okay, a lot of good apps. I heard a lot of good ideas at the developer night last night. If I do a get status, I'm in master. If I do a get branch -a for all the branches, make sure you go to Firebase login during class. So I'll do get checkout, Firebase login dash during class. Okay, you'll see I'm switched over there. If I do a get status, okay, I probably should do an npm install over here too, because there's a lot of additional code in this one. We probably shouldn't even have done an npm install in master. We probably should have just came over here and did it, but that's okay. Go ahead and do it again. It should be much quicker this time because we at least have the default node modules. There's just some additional Angular Material modules that I'm using. It looks like it is downloading Firebase. So that's okay, but we'll go ahead and do an install anyway, because if you do it in your project, you'd have to do an install. I may have left some of the node modules for Firebase in there. But you can imagine, let's say I did an ng new. Okay, so I do an ng new for a new Angular app, and now I want to add Firebase into it. I go to the console, just like we did, set up a project. I log in through the CLI like we just did, and then in my new Angular app or in my new Ionic app, now I'm going to run these commands to make sure we get Firebase also installed. You'll see I'm using a lot of Angular material. I've provided that for you already. So this app looks good. You'll see it is installing AngularFire, which I was hoping it wouldn't, but that's okay. Okay, that's okay. Now, on the Firebase dashboard, it says to do that Firebase init, okay? We don't really need to do that because we're using Angular. That's for JavaScript. When I come over here, you'll see it says to do an ng add AngularFire. It says nothing about doing a Firebase init. When I do an ng add AngularFire, Firebase init is done for me. Okay, so you don't have to run Firebase init. All you need to do is this ng add AngularFire, which you'll see it's doing already, but let's go ahead and let it run. A lot of material, AngularFire is being added for us. I'm still going to do the ng add AngularFire because that's what this doc says. So don't follow the Firebase docs because that's just for JavaScript. You got to follow this tutorial here, AngularFire. It's the GitHub. These are the best docs I've seen. Now, if you go to the web, every time you do a search for Angular Firebase, you always got to do Angular Firebase or Angular Fire and then search. If you just do Firebase, all you're going to find is for JavaScript, but you're implementing it in Angular. So make sure you always search Angular Fire or Angular Firebase. Otherwise, you may not get the proper documentation. Now, if I search Angular Firebase, I'll tell you these docs that everybody uses, and they always get things wrong unless they've updated the docs. You'll see this was updated in September of 2019. We're already a year down the road. So a lot of students, they'll find these great tutorials, or at least they think they're great, on this website here called Fireship. I'm not saying it's not good. It's just they usually tend to be old. And you'll write old code, and the code will crash later. So for example, if I look up Angular Firebase Authentication, let's see what the first thing pops up. Angular templates. Do they have that Fireship? So a lot of students find this, Angular Fireship. and it has good tutorials. They got videos, they got code. It's a great website for tutorials. The problem is, and you'll see it says to go to the dashboard like we did. The problem is a lot of these are old. This says to do initialize app. If I come back over here to the true docs, okay, you'll see it says initialize app with AngularFire module. This one looks to be correct, so that's good. But a lot of these, I'm telling you, are old, so be careful. I would try to stay away from this website, although some of the docs are good. I'm not saying all of them are bad. But I would make sure the docs, you see they have really good documentation. I wish they'd update their code. The problem is Angular updates every few months, and it's hard to keep up with. So the most up-to-date docs are going to be this GitHub right here. So be careful using this one. I agree. Great docs, great videos, great website, old code. Old code usually tends to crash. So if I come over here, you'll see the next step is to do an ng add AngularFire. Now we already did this because it was in the project I did for you guys, but you would definitely want to do this next. Go ahead and run it. Make sure we have everything installed correctly. You'll see it's installing packages. It's using ng, so it's Angular add. You'll see it's updating the package JSON. You'll see package already exists, already installed, but if it wasn't there, you'd have to add this. And if I open up the project, I'll let this run, and then I'll open up the project. You'll see that it adds information in package JSON. It also adds a Firebase JSON file for you that may not have been there. Okay, package installed successfully. Okay, now here's the important part. And you got to do this. Actually, even though we installed all the node modules, you still got to do this part because you need to connect it to the Firebase application. So when you do this, if you're logged in like we've done before, you do a Firebase login to the CLI, you should see all your projects here. This is pretty cool because you need to select Gray Distribution App Fall 20 and connect to it. So this is going to link your Firebase to your front end. Not completely, it's going to link it in the JSON files. So I'm going to click on the app. You'll see it created the JSON file for me, which is sweet. It also updated angular.json. So even if you installed all the node modules, remember how I said you don't have to do a Firebase init? We've already installed the node modules, and now it just did the Firebase init, which creates this Firebase JSON file. That's what Firebase init does. So even if you have the node modules, you still have to do the Firebase init, which is what we just did here. So packages installed successfully, that's the node modules. And then creating the project, selecting the project, that's their Firebase init. So this does it both in one command. Now let's open up the project. So if I do open, go to the semester, the directory, lectures, lecture 25, grade distribution app fall 20, open it up. And now we can actually see the code. So you can see what's been added. Firebase JSON's been added. If you had this open before, you wouldn't have seen it. You'll see there in green. Firebase, okay, RC has been added. So if I do a git status, you'll see those two files have been added. And that's exactly what Firebase init does. If I open it up, you'll see it connected to my project, which is awesome. And it wrote a lot of code for me. Now we're not done. You still got to link your credentials. So I go back to the tutorial. It says to run this. And then you got to put the configuration in the environment variable. So in environments, environment.typescript, add your Firebase configuration. So you got to add this information here. Okay, so I'm going to go back over there and do it. So I'm going to go over here to environments, environment.typescript. You'll see production is false. You'll add a new line, call it Firebase, case sensitive. It's in a block. Okay, there's going to be a block coming. So I'm in the environment.typescript. I told you there was a little bit of a learning curve to set this up, but once you set it up and learn how to use the API, I think you're going to fall in love with Firebase. Everybody who I've told about Firebase, whether in my class, whether in my research project, whether in my business, whether it's other developers out in Silicon Valley, everybody we've talked to or I've talked to about Firebase, they've all fallen in love with it. Steep learning curve. Once you learn it, it's awesome. So here I'm coming over here. Grab your API key. Okay, I'm doing the learning curve for you. I'm showing you how to use it right here. So use the API keys. Grab this information back over here on your console. If you're not here, it'll be in settings, project settings, and then click on config. You don't need to copy all of it. This is for JavaScript. See, it even says for Firebase JavaScript. We're not in JavaScript, we're in TypeScript. So I'm just going to grab the contents. I'm going to grab the contents and I'm going to paste it right here. Okay, you'll see it's API key, all your valuable information. You need this in order for it to work because you need to import this in your app module. Okay, so this is step number 3. Step number 1 is go to the dashboard, create an app, set up the app ID. Then do an ngn add AngularFire, and then add this to your environment variable. Okay, next, if I'm following the tutorial, it says to go ahead and initialize your Firebase app. So you'll add 2 imports here, and then you'll put this in your imports on your app module TypeScript. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go over here to the app. I'm going to go over here to my app module TypeScript. You're going to see a lot of imports because I'm using Material. Right below it, let's add our Angular imports. So I'm going to do an import. I like to close this up first and do the import here first so it types it for me. We're going to look up AngularFire, Angular/Fire. And what did it tell us to import? You can copy them from the tutorial. It tells us to import just AngularFire and your environment variable. I'm going to go ahead and copy these. Okay, and then what does it say? In your imports, you're going to see a lot of them here. So instead of me scrolling, I'm just going to put it up here at the top. Let's say right after the app routing module. And usually I put them at the bottom. The only reason I'm not putting it at the bottom is so you guys can see the imports. So you'll do an app module, initialize app, and then pass over your credentials. Okay, you got to pass over your credentials. So in my environment variable, that's my environment variable. That's going to be that file. I have a variable called Firebase. So I'll import that and then do a comma afterwards. Okay, and that's what we need. This is what we need. So now if you go back to the Firebase docs, okay, so I added those 3 lines. If I go back to the Firebase docs, it says how to do it. Register your app with Firebase. We did that. Initialize Firebase. We just did that. And then you'll see here it says add your credentials to your project. We just did that. So it's a similar concept. It's just a little bit different with Angular since it's TypeScript. So we're running through this tutorial here. And now it says go to your ng model. So go to your app module anywhere in the project and you can import others. So if you want to import Firestore, you can use it. If you want to use Firebase Analytics, you can use it. If you want to use Firebase Authentication, you can use it. You need to import each one. So each of these tools they have to offer, if I go back to grade distribution, they have authentication, Firestore, don't use the real-time database, storage, hosting, functions, machine learning. Every one of these that I want to use, I need to import the API. They're all independent APIs. That's why they're in different tabs. So every API I want to use, I need to add an import for it. So if I come back, I want to use the authentication. So how do I do that? I'll come over here. You'll see if I want to use Firestore, it shows you what to do here. And I'm going to go back to the docs, and I can look up the authentication docs. Getting started. It tells you, okay, import your Firebase auth here in your module. I'm surprised it didn't say to put it in your app module, which it should be. Okay, it should be in your app module as well. So let's go ahead and add that. If I want to use authentication, which is what we're going to do today, I need to import it. If I want to use Firestore, I need to import it. So from AngularFire, I'm going to import. You'll see Firestore, storage, messaging, which is push notifications, cloud functions, and you see the Firebase auth. Okay, so import Firebase Fire auth, semicolon. Now when I type here, it would be automatically. And then I'm just going to keep all these together. So I would add it here in my import. Let's see, I may have done the wrong one. It's going to be Firebase auth module. It's going to be Firebase auth module. Make sure you get that correct. You'll see it did AngularFire module. So it's going to be AngularFire auth module. You'll see everything I'm importing here are all modules, module. So make sure you use the Firebase auth module. We're also going to be using Firestore, so we might as well go ahead and add that import now. Every service you use, you got to add an import. They're all independent APIs. So I'm going to use AngularFire Firestore. Don't use the real-time database. I don't even know if the real-time database is an option anymore. Let's see. Yeah, it's right here, database. Don't do database. Use Firestore. Database, if you want to know the difference, database is like JSON. It's just storing a bunch of JSON. It's almost like local storage. Do you remember how simple local storage was? Firestore is more like MongoDB, where I can do searching, I can do sorting, I can do filtering. With the real-time database, you don't really have that option. You have to pull all of the data, and you do all of the filtering, sorting, and searching in the front end. With Firestore, I can put where clauses. With real-time database, I don't have that functionality. There may be very limited functionality, but it's not like MongoDB. So the real-time database is like local storage JSON, not much functionality. Probably will be deprecated here soon. Firestore is like MongoDB, like a full-on database. It's more scalable. If you read any of Firebase's docs, they tell you to use Firestore. I think they have the real-time database still, probably because some people are still using it, so they can't get rid of it. But they definitely recommend you use Firestore. So I'm going to import the Firestore module. Okay, I'm going to add that here. I'm not sure why my prettier is not working. It usually works. It's not working at this time. Wish it was. Okay, here's what we've added. So we've added these imports. Now let's use it. Okay, now let's use it. So now once you've had these imports, we can finally use it. So I've already created these pages for you. And let's go ahead and set this up. So I have a login page. If you look at the HTML, it's already here for you. So I can go ahead and do an ng serve. Let me do a get status. You'll see what's added. So I'm going to do a get add all. I'm going to do a get commit. We're in the during class. So after adding imports and ng add AngularFire. Pretty sure you disabled your text formatter during one of the lectures. Oh, I did. I may have. I would like to put that back. I don't know if you remember how I did that, but I kind of missed it at this time, and although it's not the best format because it doesn't really do full tabs. It just kind of does like 3 spaces, but it's nice when that's enabled. And I think you can configure it if you want to do full tabs. I usually like full tabs better, but you'll see how deep this is. Look how deep this tree is. So if you do full tabs, it definitely pushes it over quite a bit. So the HTML is there for you. If I run this ng serve, let's take a look. Hopefully it looks okay. Hopefully the app runs. Try to do an ng serve. Hopefully that app runs. Let's see what it looks like. What we're going to focus on today is the backend. I want to focus mainly on Firebase. We're getting short on time, so we need to move because I wanted to get this authentication working. There's a lot to learn just to get the project set up. But once you have it set up, again, it's going to save you a lot of time. You'll see I'm using reactive forms. So I have a form group. You'll see I'm using Angular Material. So I have mat tabs, mat form fields. You'll see I'm using the for control name. So it's a reactive form. I also have a register form. It's in a different tab. And in the login component TypeScript, this is where we're going to write our backend. Okay, this is where we're going to write our backend. So you'll see I'm using MVC. I have a service file, which is for my authentication. If you wanted to pull data, you want to pull data from the database, you should create a separate service. So have a service for your login, have a service for data retrieval and all of the different commands for data. So separate your code, have it well written. Okay, this is the home page. If I go over to login, here's what it looks like. It's actually not what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to have a little thing here in the middle with the tabs. So this is actually not functioning 100% correctly. Let's see if there's any warnings or errors. May have some errors there, maybe some warnings. So the UI is not 100% perfect. It should be here in the middle, like a module, like a modal. A modal, and it has the 2 tabs at the top. But at least you can see some formatting. It looks better than just a default page. Let's focus on the backend. So here, when I click log in, you'll see I have my reactive forms up there at the top. Here's login. So if the login form is valid, we're going to call the service file to go ahead and log in. So I've already imported the service file in the constructor. You'll see that service file is here. And we're essentially going to call the service file. So in the login component, in login component.typescript, we haven't written it yet, but we can go ahead and let's go over here to the service file. Let's go over here to the auth service TypeScript. You'll see I have a login here. So given the email and password, I want to be able to log into Firebase's authentication. And that's going to happen here in the auth service. So make sure you do MVC. And we're going to be using Firebase's login system. So the first thing you need to do is add the import here as well. Okay, so make sure you add the import up here as well. And now we're following the tutorial. So if I come back over here to auth, you'll see I have to add the import up here at the top, and then I have to call sign in, basically, and I pass in the username and password. That's how easy it is. It's one line of code to get this OAuth working. After you get the project set up, it's one line of code to sign in. So I'm going to use AngularFire auth from, okay, AngularFire auth. Okay, so I imported the module before. Now I'm going to actually import the auth file. And look how easy this is. Oh, I love Firebase. One line of code. I have my OAuth working. All I'm going to do is return this. Actually, sorry, I need to import it in the constructor. Okay, import it in the constructor. So I have a private variable. What are we going to call it? We're going to call it, let's call it AngularFire auth. So we'll call it AF auth for AngularFire auth. We're going to import the AngularFire auth here in the constructor. Once I have it import, I can do this, do the dot notation, call AngularFire auth, Guess what? They have a built-in method. Sign in with email and password. Okay, sign in with email and password right here. And guess what? All I do, pass the email and password. My login is complete. I did the dashboard. I imported Firebase. I'm calling Firebase's API. That's what I'm saying. It's going to save you days worth of time. If you could see my face right now, I'm smiling because I'm only writing one line of code and I just wrote an OAuth system. Now, the Google OAuth I was going to show you last class is also this quick. But remember in 2830, how many lines of code we wrote to get the login to work? We had to go and connect to the backend. Backend, make sure it's a username and password. Goes to the database, searches, finds it, returns back to the front end. Front end has to set a cookie, or backend has to set a session variable. With Firebase OAuth, it happens all automatically. If I want to set the session variable, I do it up here. They have built-in functionality to set the session. So up here in the constructor, I'll say, okay, AngularFire Authentication. I want to set the persistence for the authentication to session. So I can actually set it with a variable here. So they have different parameters that you can use. Now you'll have to search this. So to learn how to use the API, you got to learn and go look at the docs. But once you figure it out, then you just call the functions that are available. Now this is actually asynchronous. So the sign in with email and password, you'll see if I do it, I can do a .then, which you have to wait till it signs in and then you go and do something. So I want this call to be asynchronous as well. So I'm going to return this sign in with username and password to the login form, and I'm going to make this function asynchronous. That way I can still use the then capabilities over there in the controller. This is my model, the service file, and I'm going to use the .then in the controller so the controller can switch the page. So make this function async and return this asynchronous call. Now logout is just as easy. Guess what? Return this Angular Firebase Authentication. All I do is call sign out and it handles it for me. What about sign up? Sign up is a little bit harder. Okay, sign up is a little bit harder. We're running out of time, so I'm not going to go over the docs. You can look up at the docs. So I'm going to call this AngularFire Authentication. They have one already. Create user with email and password. How awesome is this? I'll pass the user name and password, email and password. It's asynchronous, so I'm going to call then. Once it's done, then what do you want to do? Well, after it's done, I want to go ahead and save this user into my database. I want to save the user into the database. So I'm going to say then. It's going to have a result. It's a lambda. You're going to have to figure out this syntax. It's a little bit different. Okay, it's a little bit different with Angular. They have the same syntax in JavaScript. They also use the .then. So if I create the new user and it's successful, which is the .then I'm going to create a constant. I'm going to call this new user. It's going to be a type user. We're going to specify that here in a second. It's going to have a first name, an email, and a UID, which is going to be Firebase's UID. So the result, I'm going to say, hey, result, whatever user you just created, give me the current user and give me the UID. Firebase creates the UID just like MongoDB has their own UID. Okay, it's created automatically. So I'm going to take that UID and store it into the database. Now, Firebase Authentication and Firestore are two separate things. They're not the same thing. I have a UID from the Firebase Authentication. Let me go back real quick. I know I'm blocking your code. Here's authentication. Here's the UID right here. This is automatically created when I create a new user. I did that earlier. I want to then store that over here into Firestore. That way I can access the same user. That way I can match the users up from both of these APIs. Remember, these are two separate APIs. They're independent of each other. So I'm taking the UID from one and storing it in the other. I'm going to create a function because I may need it for others. I don't want to write the same code over and over again. So this new user, I'm going to create a function. It's right here. So how do I update the database? So we're talking about two separate things now. We're talking about Firebase Authentication, and we're talking about Firestore. Here's how you update or add data. Look how easy this is. The syntax is funny. That's why I said there's a steep learning curve, but it's 2 lines of code. So I'm going to say Angular Firestore. It's going to be a Firestore document. It's going to be of type user. We still need to define this. We haven't defined it yet. And we're going to call, we haven't imported it yet. We're going to call Angular Firestore, AFS. We're going to create a new document. The document is going to be, now I'm using a tick mark here. It's not a regular parentheses. It's a tick mark, a back tick. And this has special functionality. What it means is it's a variable. It's not a string. So it's going to be users / remember how documents work in MongoDB, with the actual user ID. So it's going to be dynamic. So that's why these are tick marks, are not quotes. We're going to dynamically set the user UID. And then we're going to close this up. Okay, we're going to close this up. Once I set that document, then I'm going to do this. Return user ref. This is just a reference. So what it does is it creates a document with that user ID. That way the document ID, the user ID, they're all matching. If I don't do this, Firebase will create a random ID, just like MongoDB. Whenever you insert into MongoDB, the database ID is randomly generated. If you want to prevent this, here's how you do it. I tell it what ID to use, and then I'm going to set data into it. So I'll call the set method. This is from the docs. We're running out of time, so I'm not going to go over there. And then I have a parameter here called merge true, which means the document's already been created. So whatever additional data, I'm going to merge it with this UID. Okay, so 2 lines of code. This is what the docs say to do. I could go over to the docs, but we're running out of time. Let's get this. Let's see if this can work. Let's see if this can work. So I need to add 2 imports here. I'm trying to do it while you can look at all the code. Let me zoom out a little. Up here in the constructor, you need 1 more. So I'll do private. We're going to call it AFS for Angular Firestore. And we're going to import the Angular Firestore. Okay, we're going to import Angular Firestore right here in the constructor. So now these lines of code work. UID doesn't work. We need to set up this user type. We need to set up this user type, which we will. Okay, remember we're following the proper programming techniques just like we did back for the business application, for the Angular business application that we made. So you could have your types file. If I go over here, it's an interface. Okay, this interface will have 3 things. You can always add it later to have more. It's going to have a first name, which is going to be a string. It's going to have an email, which is going to be a string. These should be lowercase strings. And it's going to have a UID, which is going to be a string. These should be semicolons. And this should be lowercase s. Now, when you save it, there should be no compile errors. There should be no compile errors. Okay, so the same things here. Let's see, we're out of time. I'm going to keep going. I want to see if this login can work. We're like 2 steps away. So let me get the attendance if you need to leave. Hold on a second. Don't type it yet. Okay, you can type it now. If you got to leave, go ahead. I'm going to keep going. We're like 2 steps away from getting this to work. You'll see the setup process took a little bit of time, but to log in is 1 line of code. To log out is 1 line of code. To create a user, it's 2 lines of code. Okay, so that's how awesome Firebase is. It'll really help you with your final project. I recommend taking a look at it for whoever's doing back-end development on your team. It'll save you a lot of time. That way you can make a really cool application. Again, the teams that make good applications are the ones who use APIs, the ones who use these tools that are available. The teams who try to create everything from scratch takes a long time. They can't get as much done. So find tools, find APIs, find libraries, find pre-existing things on the web. Reference them. Make sure you reference them, but definitely use them for your final project. That way you can get a lot done. That's why it's called Hack Week Project. What can you get done in a short amount of time? How much can you get on the prototype? The only way to do a lot is to use these pre-existing tools. Definitely take a look at Firebase. That's one of my #1 recommendations to speed up development time. Okay, if you got to leave, put your name and pop-in in on the chat. Okay, before you leave, put your name and pop-in on the chat. I'm going to keep going. And then once I'm done, I'll come back and I'll answer any questions that anybody may have. We're just a few steps away. Let's see if we can get this to work. If you got to go, put your name and pop-in on the chat. If you can stay, here we go. So I'm going back to the auth service. Okay, so I've just wrote a few lines of code, a few things real quick. These calls need to be asynchronous. That way, the controller can wait for them. Because think about this. I'm calling an API, and I tell it to log in or create a user. That may take some time. I don't want it to go to the next line immediately. I want it to wait until it creates a new user, and then after it's done, do something. If I put create new user and then immediately the next line I say go to the home page, well, it may take a while for that user to create, and then you may have some logical errors. So you always got to wait. These are all asynchronous calls. Creating a user may take some time. So create a user. Once you're done, then go ahead and update the database. If I try to update the database immediately, I will not have this user ID and the code will crash. So you got to wait. So sign up needs to be asynchronous. So we'll put asynchronous here. Log in needs to be asynchronous. And log out can also be asynchronous because it may take some time to log out as well. So we're going to make all these calls asynchronous. Now, the reason they're asynchronous is because I'm using Firebase's API, so I may need to wait until it's done. Some of the other functions may not need to be asynchronous. It all depends. Once I have these functions set up, I'm going to go over back to the login component.typescript, and I can call this function here. So if the form is valid, I've already synced the auth service. I've already synced it here in the constructor, so I can call it directly. So I'll say this auth service, I'm going to call it login. Login, I'm going to pass 2 parameters. I'm going to grab the login form group. I'm going to get the email, and I'm going to grab its value. Looks like this reactive form is a little bit old. It might be Angular 9 instead of Angular 10. That's okay. Hopefully you get the idea. I'm going to grab username and password. I'm also going to grab its value. I don't need a comma after this one since it's the last. And here's the asynchronous stuff. So I don't want to switch immediately. I want to log in. Once the login is done, then, that's the whole point of making it asynchronous, then I'm going to have a result. And once it's done, if the result is true, let's say if the result is true, then I can do a router. So then I can route navigation to the home page. Home page looks like this. It's just an empty string. Once it's done logging in, if the login is not good, for some reason, wrong username and password, whatever it may be, I'm going to have a snack bar. I'm going to open up a snack bar. This is a Angular Material thing. I'm going to put unable to log in. You'll see here some message here, some configuration. So I'm going to put that null. But I do want to put the duration to 4 seconds. That's how long this snack bar will appear. Now I wrote this all in one line. It's common to put these parameters on the new line. Okay, it is common to put those on a new line. I'm going to try the then. What else may occur is an exception may occur. So I'm going to do a catch afterwards, which may be an error. Okay, so this is how these asynchronous calls go. They're pretty long. One line of code may turn into 10, and I'm basically going to say the same thing. If there's an exception, I'm also going to say the same thing, and I could pass the error here. I can also pass some message here. And then I'm finally going to do my semicolon. This semicolon is still for this line of code. So try to log in, wait. Once it's done, then if it returns true, navigate to the home page. Otherwise, there may be an error, wrong username and password, or maybe an exception occurred. The code crashed, couldn't log into Firebase, couldn't connect to Firebase. We need to catch the exceptions as well. Some people will do a try catch. That's old school. Make sure you call the catch method. Some people do a async and await, which is probably what you'll find in that tutorial I was showing you earlier. That's old school. Don't use that. Use the then method. So this is going to be the try. This is going to be the catch. This is going to be the async call. This is going to be the wait. You don't need to write those keywords like that tutorial I showed you earlier probably does. Let's see. We haven't got to log out yet. Let's just see if this works, and then maybe we can call it quits for today. I want to do register as well. Let's go ahead and do register really quick, so that way you guys can have it. So if I want to register, same type of concept. If the login form is valid, then I'm going to do the auth service again. I made a sign up method. Did I make a sign up method? Let me see, auth service, sign up. Yes, I did. Pass in the 3 parameters it needs. So it's going to be the form group's email value. It's going to be the form group's, let's see, this is the register form now, not the login form. This is going to be the register form's login's password dot value, and the register form's name. I called it first in the TypeScript. I probably should have called it name. Once they sign up, it's asynchronous as well. So once they sign up, then it's going to pass back some result. So if it's successful, I'm also going to navigate to the home page. No reason to make them log in again, although some websites do. So once they sign up, I'm also going to route them to the home page. Home page is the default page, so I'm just going to put an empty string here. And an exception may occur. So if an exception may occur, I'll have an error. You'll see this one line of code is becoming very long. And same type of thing. I'm going to do a snack bar. Snack bar with this message, instead of able to log in, it'll be unable to register. And same type of information. So try to sign up. If it's successful, then route to the home page. If it's not, display an error message. And we could do an if else in here as well. Maybe register form returns true, maybe it returns false. The false wouldn't be caught here, but if an exception occurred, it would be caught there. Normally, Firebase doesn't crash. It's very solid code. It may crash if you have the wrong key or you implement it incorrectly. But if you implement it correctly, Firebase is sound. It most likely will not crash. Okay, I'm curious to see if this works. I'm going to recompile just to make sure. Hopefully it works. Okay, hopefully it works. If you need any code, let me know. I can scroll up or scroll down. Oh, let's see. This register doesn't need to be async. I'm not sure why that's async. Are we in the auth guard? You can probably take that off. We don't need that to be async. Unless it's waiting in the front end, unless the front end's waiting for it. I may need to verify that. I can't remember if the front end's waiting for it. Okay, while we're waiting, let me go over some. Okay, no, it's compiled successfully. Let's see what it looks like. Okay, that's the home page. We got to set up auth guards. You got to do that for your final project as well, auth guards. Make sure you look into auth guards. You should not be able to URL hack your page. But over here, if I do test@test.com, do pass, click on log in, boom, went to the home page. 2 lines of code. If I go to register, let's see if I can create an account. So I'm just going to do another one, maybe test2@test2.com. Password is going to be pass again. Oh, wait a second. This is the wrong thing. Let me see. Name. So name will be Professor Wergeles. Email will be test2@test2.com. Pass will be pass again. Let's try to register. Click on register. It went to the home page. Let's see if it's over here in Firebase Auth. I hope it is. Otherwise, there may be a bug, but let's check. Boom. There it is. Look how awesome that is. How many lines of code did we write? We wrote 4 or 5 lines of code. I have my full authentication system working. Now, I didn't provide auth cards. We're going to talk about that later. 5, 6 lines of code. I have my login working. Do you know how long that would have took to write that myself, and how many lines of code? Probably 100 lines of code, and it probably still would not be as good as this OAuth here. Because to create an OAuth system, it's very complicated. Not just checking username and password, you got to save tokens, and when the token expires, you got to make the user sign in again. It's complicated. 3 lines of code, Firebase, log in. 3 lines of code, register, create a new user account. Okay? Very powerful. Very powerful. Let me save this code really quick.
I got an error that says a data breach on the site has exposed your password when I did the register.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I wonder if I have that error too. Are you using my key?
What do you mean?
Did you get your own key?
You mean my own Firebase thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I was thinking maybe if you're using my key,
No.
that could have been caused. Let me see. Where do you see that error?
It was after I did a register.
On the inspect here?
No, it was a pop-up.
Oh, it popped up?
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so I didn't see you get it, so I don't know.
Let's see. You want to look at my register code?
Let me.
Here's my register code.
I'm pretty sure I got the same thing.
One thing, did you add your environment variable in your environment TypeScript?
Yeah.
You put this here?
Yeah, and it's working fine. I just got that error. Like I was able to register. It just gave me. It just said that it wasn't secure.
Huh. That's weird. What was the error again? Say it again.
Let's see if it's still up. Okay. It says, it's a pop-up in Chrome. It says, change your password. A data breach on a site or app exposed your password.
Oh, I think
Chrome.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah, one of the sites got hacked. They say that on mine too. If I use my real password on one of them, it says one of the sites got hacked, and to set your password. And I think if you click on the message, it tells you what site got hacked. I guess Chrome is storing your passwords,
Mm-hmm.
and if one of the passwords you type was stored, and Google knows that site got hacked, it notifies you about it. So I'm sure that's probably what happened. It's probably a password that you use all the time, and Google's telling you to switch that password up because one of the sites that you've used it on before got hacked.
Let me try and
yeah, try another one. Yeah, try another one. Let's see. Any question? Let me scroll back up. How quick will this lecture be on YouTube? I would like to go back over it. I can post it right now. if Nick is still here. When you finish, can you push to GitHub? I spent the whole lecture debugging npm's cache so I could install everything properly. Yes, I will, Avery. I'll push it right now. Let me push it right now.
Okay, so yeah, I tried it with a different password and I didn't get an
Okay.
error.
Well, it's been telling me too, and I haven't changed my password yet. I need to change that too. So go ahead and change your password because some site got hacked.
Well, that was just the password. So.
Oh, really? That's odd. I was thinking maybe it was with one of your
No.
passwords you use all the time.
Nope. Those pass. Maybe a site that I use that on for like a test.
Maybe,
I don't
yeah. Yeah, maybe.
know.
Okay, the code I just wrote is up on GitHub right now for the
Also,
during class.
if I log in with like false login information, am I supposed to get some sort of error message because it just doesn't do anything?
Yeah, I haven't set that up yet.
Okay.
We're going to set that up here in a second. It's in this.
I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, and I got an auth failure too. In this auth service, or sorry, in the login component, we had this else, but it's not hitting yet. We need to, in the auth service, we need to return some other information here. We haven't done that yet.
I see.
Yeah, so we'll do that. We'll do that here in a little bit.
Okay.
But I think this is a good stopping point for today. Let's see. When you're finished, push it up to GitHub. That's done. I got an error with the auth service. I think mine's imports. Can you go back to the code? Adrian, what code do you need? Can we integrate this with the Google Auth? You'll want to choose one or the other. So are you talking about last lecture? If you're talking about last lecture, you'll either choose that Google OAuth or you'll choose Firebase Authentication. Now, with Firebase, though, you can do Google Auth. So if I come over here to Authentication and I do sign-in method and I enable Google here, then when they click the Google button, they have another function. So if I come back to the code, instead of sign in with username and password, I can say this, AngularFire auth. You'll see sign in with link, sign in with email password, sign in with phone number, and they should have a sign in with Google. They should have a sign in with Facebook. I don't see that here at this time, but they do have it. So you can sign in with Google. There's some pop-up, I think, that you do. Sign in with pop-up, maybe. If you do sign in with pop-up, you'll have a little Google button, and you can click the Google button to log in. So if you want to use Google OAuth and Firebase, use the Firebase's Gmail or Google account here. Don't mix the old auth with this auth. Let's see. Can you go back to the auth service again? Here's auth service. And here are the 4 functions that we wrote.
I think he was asking for the imports.
Oh, you need the imports? Okay. Imports are up here. Okay, let me end this recording and then we can keep going. Okay, that's it for today. Put your name and pop it in on the chat so I can get you for the attendance. We'll finish up Firebase Authentication next time. We'll also look at more into Firestore. We've added data to Firestore. I'm going to show you how to retrieve data. We're going to take a look at cloud functions, and we're going to put a scraper in that cloud function. So stick with Professor Wergelies, and we'll see you next time.